Hello and welcome. My name is Vasiliki Nihas. My background is in education and I later worked as a consultant to the federal government and to the state government of New South Wales in areas relating to cultural diversity and multiculturalism, an area where I got to see firsthand what happened when kids were labelled, and labelled with names such as attention deficit or hyperactivity disordered. Those names actually make an impact, and it's a long-term impact on children in our society. I'm here with Dr. Gloria Wright. Gloria's PhD was in the area of ADHD, and she's written this fantastic research book on the medicalization trap and what happens when and how a child goes from being this perfect creature that is born to parents to a little tyrant or a monster or a label with the initials ADHD. Gloria, thank you so very much for doing this. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was that led you to the book? What was your impetus for writing?
Like you, Vasiliki, I've been in education for some time, travelling around lots and lots of schools, looking at a variety of problems. And ADHD was one of those types of categories, if you like, that always puzzled me because I saw children in a variety of ways behave differently. And the same child in one particular setting would be all over the place running around or behaving in a way that wasn't appropriate for the classroom. And yet in another would be focused, attentive, and this was a real curiosity. So ADHD, like some other disorders too, really did make me think, what is this and what's the source? Later when I was doing my PhD, I was curious about the journey, as you said, coming into the world as a little child. At what point, the question remains, does a child actually take on the identity of a person with ADHD? Who's involved? Who are the key stakeholders? How does it actually happen? Do you know, it's like this, as if perhaps one day you have a blindfold on and you go somewhere and then you take the blindfold off and you think, oh, okay, where am I? What I'm interested in, and particularly in this study, is how did we get there? What actually happened? Who was involved? So these were the questions that I explored.
The how we get there I found fascinating because when I began reading the book, some of your early historical background, the kind of definitions of ADHD that were actually around in the 1890s, you know, but to certify children for lunatic asylums, they're horrendous, and you really see the impact of what a label like idiocy or lunacy can do to the life of someone. And it seems we've become more sophisticated about the labels. We've become better at the labeling, and the labeling doesn't sound so terrible, but they're still labels.
The thing is this, that let's say, for instance, we have 1,000 people and all with different hair colour. And we think in our minds, oh, there are blondes, there are brunettes, there are people with dark hair, light hair. But in actual fact, if we lined all those people up and we examined their hair, it'd be very difficult to actually categorise anybody because it's a continuum. And yet human beings, we just love to categorise, and we need to, in a sense, to be able to talk about anything, right? But it's the negative way in which certain ways we put people in boxes, particularly for their behaviour and their diverse learning styles. We put them in boxes, we straitjacket their gifts and abilities, and we say that they have something wrong with them, and with actually no evidence whatsoever.
I was amazed by the fact that, and again this goes to my cultural diversity background, I guess, that the kind of figures were so different in Europe, much, much lower to what they are in terms of diagnosis, to what they are in America, for instance, or in Australia. And we are talking dramatically lower. And the study that you alluded to, where it was a completely different ballgame diagnosing in Ireland as to what was acceptable behaviour in Italy. And so that the kind of contradistinctions in relationship to that cultural differentiation of what is appropriate behaviour, what is okay behaviour, what is labelled as acceptable as opposed to non-acceptable.
And you're so right. It so much depends on our view of normality. So here's the point. We're not talking about pathology.
Correct.
Right?
That I found interesting.
Yes. So let's say you have a broken leg or something like that, heaven forbid. But, you go and get an x-ray and we can see the break. And we know doctors who have expertise in this know how to fix that. And you'd be the first person, and I would too, to go and seek medical help, right? But the evidence is there. The problem when we make a mental health diagnosis for a child, or an adult for that matter, we're using all sorts of culturally defined indicators, but the outcome is very much a medical one. The outcome is about diagnosing somebody with a particular condition that, as you said earlier, is a disorder or a deficit, right? We're labelling them with this that will, in this day and age, actually be digitally recorded as their pedigree for the rest of their lives. Now, this is a very serious step to take, and it's happening all too often within just one consultation.
So is it accurate that there is no biological test that you can really do to determine ADHD in terms of its pathology? There is nothing which actually gives you that.
There are bodies of evidence to show all sorts of patterns and information data that's coming through with perhaps brain scans, and there will be people that will say that it's genetic and whatever. But the problem in all of this is the replication of this data. And in real terms, what's happening is that children are coming into a diagnostic situation and these things aren't being used anyway. It's a matter of often mothers describing the children's behaviour at home. And please understand, we're not talking about anybody doing anything awful or evil. A doctor saying, oh, well, have this diagnosis, or a parent flippantly saying something like, oh, well, my child's just a nightmare. Parents and mothers in particular often really struggle with this. They don't necessarily want their child to be labelled with something. But what they also understand is that perhaps this diagnosis will get the help that my child needs. And here lies the dilemma that parents face. How do I get the help that my child needs and avoid or sidetrack this awful feeling of labelling my child?
Gloria, I think that's really important, and I think that that's a logical point for us to actually take up this debate again the next time that we come together. But thank you. I think that was just a fantastic introduction and great to canvass the complexities, and I think next we need to actually delve into those complexities a bit more.
Thank you for having me, Vasiliki.